What is up, guys? Mike Merlin's here with Wretched Sound. Feels good to say that. Welcome to episode 48 of the podcast. This is also going to be part 12 of our Black Sabbath series. Tonight we're talking about Seventh Star, which is as the album cover implies, this is the album where Tony Iommi was left all by his fucking lonesome. So, we're going to give Bill Page, new contributor here at the zine. We're going to give Bill Page from Wrong the Oppressor a call and talk about Seventh Star. And I know Bill is very enthusiastic about this. He loves the obscure Black Sabbath years, the albums that nobody talks about, the confusing period where there was a different singer on every album and a revolving door of musicians around Tony Iommi. And should these albums have even been called Black Sabbath albums, or should they have been Tony Iommi solo albums, for example? Especially Seventh Star. We're going to talk about that and a few more things, obviously. Hopefully, go for at least an hour like we usually do. And, let's just give Bill a call and jump right in. Thanks for listening, guys.
Hello.
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Not much. How's it going?
Oh, it's going well as can be expected. I worked the graveyard shift last night. The graveyard shift last night. Got up at around 6:30, and it's 9:30 now, and I'm still pretty groggy, but I'm ready to rock this shit.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we're talking about we're talking about an era of Sabbath that you love to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was just introing this episode in before calling you, and I basically called this the obscure era because, every album is kind of a standalone in this period, different vocalist on every album, and it's like one album per vocalist as well. At least these couple we're doing right now, and then obviously we get to your boy Tony Martin on the next one, Eternal Idol.
Yeah.
But for now, discussing Seventh Star. I don't know. Did you have anything to open up with, or are you ready to jump right in?
I'm ready to jump right in.
He's ready to jump right in. He usually is. All right. So at this point, Tony Iommi is the sole founding member left in Black Sabbath. Even Geezer had left after the Born Again tour. So once again, the record label, Warner Brothers got involved and demanded this be a Black Sabbath album. But should it have been Iommi's first solo album, in your opinion?
I think this one should have been his first solo album. I know we discussed this on Born Again, and I was kind of on the fence, who knows how it would have went. But this album was obviously not written to be a Black Sabbath album.
Sure.
It's when you're diving into these things the way we are, and you're kind of listening to these albums in more of a close succession, and you're paying a little more attention about it when you're analyzing it.
Yep.
I could honestly say that this is the most un-Black Sabbath sounding Black Sabbath album.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's and that's even compared to because you have things like we discussed with Never Say Die about how it was a very diverse sounding album. But I think because you had all the members there, it still sounded very familiar.
Yeah, everyone in that original lineup has their own unique signature, very unique musicianship, and Ozzy's vocal style, obviously. They're all super recognizable players, and we've been listening to them. People have been listening to them for 50 plus years. So, but it's you can put those guys in a room and they can write weird stuff. Weird for Sabbath, but it's still going to sound like them. But yeah, this is a whole new group of guys, and I feel like in a lot of ways, this is a nostalgic album for me because it just reminds me of like all my favorite 80s movie soundtracks rolled into one, like super just high energy rock and roll, but it's got that 80s club sound to it almost.
Right. I mean, which, is a great album. I don't mean anything I said is like as bad, except that they should have called it a Black Sabbath album. Sure. I think that part probably did this record more harm than good.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the cover, I mean, I'll bring up the cover again later, but I mean, it doesn't even look like. I remember years and years ago when I first saw this album, I saw the cover and I just saw Tony Iommi's name like printed huge, and it's got that picture of him standing alone, and like I remember on the copy that I saw, the words Black Sabbath, like that, it was printed very small on the record, and like I thought it was a solo album when I saw it, and I didn't even realize when I first took note of the record that it was part of the Black Sabbath discography. So yeah, and yeah, like you even said, like musically it doesn't sound like that formula that Black Sabbath is notorious for. Like this album totally stands out, and it is completely different from anything else in the catalog, and it's because of who's there and who played on the record with Tony.
Right.
So yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's a Black Sabbath album, so we're going to talk about it in the Black Sabbath series, but yeah, I think Warner Brothers got that one wrong. So we've talked about Jeff Nichols before and some cool keyboard passages and such. Thoughts on Jeff Nichols being an actual member of the band instead of just a session musician?
I think it's great. I mean, he adds a lot to a lot of Black Sabbath albums through the years. It's important. I think it's important for someone like that to actually be recognized as a part of the band.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, because at that point he had a catalog within a catalog. Like he had like an internal resume with Black Sabbath at that point anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, one and done for Glenn Hughes, but because Glenn Hughes, he was bass and vocals with Deep Purple, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
But I feel like he was mostly bass in Deep Purple.
Yeah.
It's something that I kind of like mildly dived into because I thought he did more vocally with Deep Purple, but I think they had like kind of a rotating singer situation at that time. I think him and somebody else were doing vocals
right
at the same time.
Yeah. Well, same with Sabbath. I mean, this that's like the recurring theme right now is like the revolving door of vocalists. So yeah, thoughts on Glenn Hughes on vocals, and I was gonna make this a two-parter actually, like your thoughts on Glenn Hughes and your thoughts on Ray Gillen, since Glenn Hughes was fired 5 days into the 7th Star tour.
I think Glenn Hughes does a great job with the vocals on this. Like, he sounds awesome. He's a great singer. I've listened to his other stuff with other bands he's done after this too. He's a great singer, just all around. It's too bad he couldn't complete it, but Ray Gillen's also a great singer. And the real amusing part about that is because we were talking about this earlier in the week, and I couldn't remember the exact time span of how Ray was in Black Sabbath. And it's funny because I didn't realize that there was a double disc version of this out here with a live set with Ray on vocals.
Yep.
And then there's a double disc set of The Eternal Idol of him doing the original studio sessions for The Eternal Idol. Yep. So it's interesting between all these singer switches that you have one singer who only shows up, whose period of time was so brief, he's not even really officially on anything.
Right.
On the boat, and I'm really bummed because I've never heard the live disc with him singing on it. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Like, after looking into it, I talked to my friend who's really good he's been really good over the years about getting all the deluxe Black Sabbath reissues but this is the one he completely missed the boat on.
Wow.
Because I think it was one because when it came out, it was a little more expensive, and I don't know. I don't remember. I remember it coming out, but I don't remember it being very like, you know, Ray Gillen live disc. It was just like, oh, and live set. Which is like, well, why am I going to spend this much money just to get a live set?
Right, but that's what made it special, because it's a live set with a different vocalist. So,
Right,
super convoluted time period.
Yeah, but it would have been, like, I wish I had that now. I've kind of been doing some searching online. It's a little more really expensive disc to get, but I might have to make that investment soon, because I really want to hear it, because the Eternal Idol version with him is awesome.
I'm about to spend an unhealthy amount of money on Black Sabbath media because of this series. Because I already have maybe, I don't know, I'd say maybe half the studio albums on vinyl. I've got 5 or 6 on cassette, and then I've got all of them on CD, at least the studio albums. But I'm prepared to further my own personal deep dive into the band. Like, I was just at Music Matters today looking through shit, and I'm like, man, because, like, I look at the Black Sabbath records every time I'm there. I look at everything I don't already have, and, like, nobody ever buys the shit from there. Like, it never moves. So, like, I go to the same shelf, and I look at the same records every time I'm there, and I think to myself every time, including today, I'm going to own all this shit within the next couple months. Little by little, I'm just going to buy it all. I know I'm going to do it, and I need to just admit that to myself. So, my top songs from Seventh Star are the opener, In for the Kill, and the reason for that is, it's not anything in particular about what's going on in the song. The thing with In for the Kill is, it's, you know, for most people, especially back then, like, that was their introduction to this album. And it's so different from anything else. And it doesn't make sense in the Black Sabbath catalog. And In for the Kill is like everyone's first impression of that. And that's why I love it, because it's just like, whenever I think of this album, I think of the opening of that song, because that was my first impression of how abstract this album is, or just how strange it is compared to the rest of the catalog. And then Turn to Stone and Danger Zone for sure. So what are your top songs on Seventh Star? Like, what are your go-tos, or what do you think of first?
In for the Kill is definitely one. A lot of the reasons you stated, and I just think it's a real strong song. It's very aggressive. It's everything I like in a rock song. I really like the title track, Seventh Star, and the little like keyboard intro to it with syncs. I think those are both really good. And another song that just kind of like listening to it this time that never really stood out to me before, but did on this round of listening, is Heart Like a Wheel, because I think it's really an odd sounding song. And the other thing, even though it's kind of one of the more odd sounding songs on it, it's the song that kind of has the most, like, there's a little guitar thing Iommi does in it, which is the closest he comes to sounding like a regular Black Sabbath part.
Right.
And it's really small. Like, it's easy to even just like not notice. But listening to it, I was like, that's the closest thing I heard on this whole album to like a classic Black Sabbath's done.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I mean, I guess I sound like a broken record here. We just fucking said this, but this always happens. What I try to like, because I don't like to script, because I want it to be more of a conversation. So like, I don't like to script the episodes, but like, I just try to do an outline, like a direction to go in. But like, this always happens. Like, I get to something and it's like, well, we just fucking talked about this. But you know what? I guess we didn't. So Seven Star, it's like it's a misunderstood album and it's an underrated album. And I say misunderstood because like a lot of people don't know the story behind it and how well, it was going to be a solo album and that was what they wanted, but the record label got involved. Like a lot of people don't like take the business aspect of things into account when they're judging how a record turns out. So last episode we talked about how confusing a period this was for Sabbath, and what do you find most appealing about Sabbath's standalone and more transient albums during this period? So I guess with that I'm talking about Born Again and Seven Stars specifically. And to me it's because of all the surprises. Like again, like you already said, like in doing this series, we're like listening to all the studio albums back to back to back to back, and like no, I don't think many people really do that with Black Sabbath, but like we're doing that for like research purposes. But like when you do that and you get to these albums, you're like, what the fuck is going on? This is insane. Like if you look at the front half and the back half of the catalog, like we're in an insane convoluted period. So that's what I love about these albums is all the surprises packed within. But the constant of it is Tony Iommi, because all the other aspects of the band are like swirling around him, but like even though it's totally different, like you can hear that it's Tony Iommi playing guitar on this record.
Exactly. It's like he's a very strong songwriter no matter what. And I can get why this album and some of the things around it would turn people off. But at the same time, it's still a really strong album. And from the time I grew up in, it's like I was like getting into rock and metal around the late 80s. And so to me, something like this still sounds, it kind of hits all the right points. Even if at the time I didn't realize it as much with this album, because at the time I was getting into everything, this is honestly the Black Sabbath album I was most turned off by, for other reasons, which we'll address when we get to one of your other outline part. But looking back at it, it's a strong rock record, especially if you separate that it wasn't supposed to be a Black Sabbath album. But again, and listening to it just with everything back to back, it's kind of what makes it more interesting too. Because, if they were just doing the same thing over and over again, this would be boring at this point. Why even bother talking about it?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this catalog is anything but boring as you go from front to back. So, do you find... we talk about the album covers at least once every time we do this. And this is like a touchy album cover. At least that's how I feel about it, because clearly like there was a plan. They went in with a plan, like, okay, I don't know, if I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm not looking at it, he's in the desert or something. So it's Tony Iommi and he's standing alone like on the side of the road or in the desert or something, and like the idea is a solo album, like, or his solitude, or the fact that he is the sole survivor of like this apocalyptic thing. And it's like I get this somber vibe from it and the look on his face. I mean, somebody could have just told him, have that look on your face, or maybe that is his natural facial expression in that photo. But it's like, do you find the album cover sad or inspiring or a little bit of both? Because I see him alone and he's uncertain of which direction to go, and the band, look at hindsight's 2020, so the band was far from done, but he didn't really know that at the time. So what when you look at that photo of him, like, what do you get from it?
I've never been able to look at this album from the point of the photo on it, because the album cover has always been one of the biggest turnoffs of this record for me.
Yeah.
More because it says Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. And it's like, at the time that I first saw this, it's like, and this kind of falls into a time, like, stores were clearing out their vinyl, so you could get it all relatively cheap. So, like, I got Born Again, I got like between $3 to $5. And with all of that, this is the only one I really hesitated on because of how the whole album was laid out and looked and labeled. It was really off-putting.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably not the only person who feels that way. Without even knowing what it sounded like, I was just kind of like, what the fuck is this? Like that's like what that's how my teenage mind looked at it, you know?
Right.
And to me, that just reinforces what a bad call it was by the label, to where sometimes, you know, the big name doesn't always sell.
Right.
And to bring it around a little bit, I know we're talking about the album cover, but to kind of bring it back to that different sound of this too, the one thing that I was thinking about is you look at the year this came out, and if it would have just been an Iommi record, what would have made it, and they had that sound to it, a reason I think it would have done better is look at how Ozzy sounded at that time.
Yeah.
It wasn't really that far off. I mean, they're distinctly different, but definitely in the same road. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's usually the same style of, like, you know, it's metal, but it's hard rock. You know, that kind of, like, blurry area there of the two.
Sure.
So it's like, when you look at it like that, and how well Ozzy was doing, like, I know he was a singer, so it kind of gave him a little bit of a stronger, you know, a little more of a stronger point with everything, but I just think it could have done so much better if it was just, like, marketed better.
Yep. Yeah.
And like, it's just like, what a fucking, just to reinforce again, look what a bad call this was from the label. It's just like, I think even if you look at what was going on at the time, it's like, what were they thinking?
They were too focused on the name. They were too focused on the name Black Sabbath and selling that name. But what I don't think they realized at the time was Tony Iommi had really built up a name for himself by that point.
Right. And then you had somebody like Glenn Hughes singing on it, who wasn't like some fucking no-name singer on it.
No.
You know, Ray Gillen might be a good singer, but who the fuck knew who he was then?
Right. Right.
You know, he didn't break through until he was with Badlands.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're like Born Again, you know, you've got somebody from a great other rock band from the same era. It's like, come on, guys.
Right.
Like,
right.
And the sound that was popular at the time, there might be points in time where you better be like, well, maybe, like, if we were in the 90s in the grunge era, to be like, well, maybe it'd be safer to do this with a Black Sabbath album because it'll bring in some of the old metalheads. No, this was a time when that sound was hot.
Yeah.
This was a shit that was selling.
Yeah.
If there was any time to capitalize on being able to change your name, this was the time.
Yeah, the record sounds like the mid-'80s. And
Right.
it's dated, but like you said, at that time, that shit was selling like hotcakes, so...
Right.
Absolutely.
And it was Tony Iommi writing it. It sounds better than records that sold better than this.
Yeah, because Tony Iommi was writing the guitar. Yeah, for sure.
Right, and he knows his shit, and he's just basically better than almost everybody else out there. And I'm not just saying that like in a biased way because I love Black Sabbath. It's just like he really just writes good stuff. He knows rock and roll. He knows heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
So what he was writing is definitely like at least a notch above what everybody else was doing at that time.
Yep. All right, so now that we're talking about, I mean, I already know your answer, but for the people listening, we're talking about, we're way out there now. You know, we've gotten to a point in the series where, like, we're islanded. You know, we're away from Ozzy and we're away from Dio. So, how would you rank the vocalists of Sabbath other than Ozzy and Dio?
Okay. I think it's a little tough to do that because I think they all have similar sounds.
Yeah.
They're all different, but kind of along the same line. And they're all very strong vocalists. I can't knock any of them for any reason.
Sure.
So I prefer him because of the albums he sang on. I think he lucked out on a couple of the better albums from all of this. He had the benefit of being more consistently there than the singers before him. Like, he even sings on more albums than Dio did.
Right.
You know, it's like if you look at Sabbath, you could really like it's whatever high regard people throw things in, but it's like Ozzy, then Tony Martin, and then Dio, as far as the number of albums they sang on, you know?
Yep.
So I would go with Tony, but I mean, Ray and Glenn are both, like, incredible vocalists. But Ray also, like, he was, like, he didn't really get a chance to find his, you know, his spot in there. Like, it's kind of hard to say that, because, like, what he did with Badlands was so, like, amazing.
Right.
Like those Badland albums, and, like, what he does on there is just, like...
Mm-hmm. You kind of answered one of the next questions, because that is a band I need to check out. So, yeah. So I mean, we already covered one of the follow-ups. But now talking about your band, your main. I mean, you're in a couple bands, aren't you? In more than one band?
I'm only in
Wrong the Oppressor.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought you were fronting more than one band, but I mean, you've been in a handful of bands, so I'm probably just kind of blurring the timeline.
I've done a couple of studio projects recently with this guy Mike, you might know, and you know, I thought those turned out pretty good. Mm-hmm. But he hasn't sent me new songs in a while.
Right.
I'm talking about you.
Right, yeah, the quarrel. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I'm gonna put I should include links to those Quarrel songs in the description. Because I thought they were pretty fucking cool.
Oh, I like them a lot too. I've been putting a lot of my old stuff out there, which might be why it might seem confusing at the moment. Because I've been spending the past few months like loading all my old bands onto Bandcamp.
Yeah, because you have the Bill Page Bandcamp too, so.
Right. So I've just like been putting like all my old bands that aren't online on there.
Right. Yeah. This is the time to do it. I've been doing that with my old bands too. Like back when I played drums like 20 years ago, like, you know, all the This Gun Smile stuff and whatever, like none of that's online anymore. So like that's what I'm trying to do is like put like a compilation together, because like, you know, occasionally people bring up the old bands and stuff. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yeah. So it's out there if people want to get it, they can.
Right. Yeah. So talking about Wrong the Oppressor, if you had to do it, what's one song on 7th Star that would work well as a hardcore cover?
I think In for the Kill.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking it as I was like, I didn't think of it when I wrote the question, but I'm reading it just now, and we had just talked about that song, and like, what a strong opener. So yeah, would be a great hardcore song for sure, hands down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I brought up how this is a nostalgic album to me. Reminds me of a bunch of different like 80s movie soundtracks, and so you were talking about Badlands, but I mean, plug some lesser known bands with like the same vibe. So like, not necessarily from the 80s, but like bands that not a lot of people talk about or are listening to, but like have like the 7th Star vibe to their music, I guess.
That's a little bit of a tough one. I don't know what would actually have the same vibe, but it's like when I listen to something, I mean, maybe it does, because I'm not listening to any of these back to back, but when I listen to something like this album, because it's the later half of the 80s, it brings to mind more like late 80s, early 90s hard rock to me. And so this isn't something that necessarily sounds like it, but the stuff that it makes me want to listen to, and that would be bands like Bullet Boys, Manitoba's Wild Kingdom, to some degree Love Hate, and think anybody could recreate now.
Right. Sure.
It's always looked at by many as like a classic sound, but I think because of my age at that time and when I got into all these bands, that's what brings it all around to me to that.
Yeah, when I stopped into Music Matters today, Rob Bork over there was talking about how, well, I was actually just reading when I was researching this last minute. I know at one point Bill Ward was extremely worried for Tony Iommi, like during the recording process of this album, and really thought Tony was going to give up on Sabbath and give up on himself more or less, just because of the revolving door of musicians. And Rob was trying to, get me to listen to more of Bill Ward's solo stuff again. And I still haven't checked out any of Bill Ward's solo stuff. But, no, so you told me to listen to Trouble. I still haven't listened to Trouble.
Oh, Trouble, you're really cheating yourself on. I think you'll really like them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just they're one of the fucking greatest bands out there. Hands down.
Yeah, I have a ton of music to listen to. I have a ton of other music to listen to because of the Sabbath series. Well, all right. Well, we know where we're headed next. Before we start talking about Eternal Idol, did you have anything to add about Seventh Star?
I mean, again, I think like every episode, I feel like a broken record at this point, but I keep telling people, if you don't like it, you need to give it another chance. Because I do feel that way about all these Black Sabbath albums. I think every single one's worth your time.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great moments on this record. Again, even though it really shouldn't be a Black Sabbath record, and this is one of the few times I would ever. This is like the only Black Sabbath album I would say that about, though. Sure. Because you can see, like when we get into Eternal Idol, he kind of gets back into a mode, like it's still a different sounding Sabbath, but more familiar.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to be different because he doesn't. Besides the fact that this was supposed to be a solo album, it's just him.
Yeah.
His other songwriters are gone.
Especially Geezer. Geezer being gone is huge.
Exactly, and you can really hear that difference come through when he's gone. Like what a big part of the songwriting. I mean, like all those original Sabbath albums are all credited for the songwriting, and when you start listening to these the way we are, you can really hear how they all had a part in it. Because it makes a difference in how it all comes together in the end.
I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but do you listen to the band Sleep?
A little bit. I've never really been huge into them, but I dig them.
They have a song on the album The Sciences. They have a song called Giza Butler. And I mean, it's a pretty, like, straightforward, like, just kind of, it's like a drone album. It's like, if you tune it out while you're listening to it, it sounds like the same riff and drum beat the whole album. But I mean, it's not really. I mean, I think they're one of those bands. Like, you can hyperanalyze their music and you can hear the nuances and the differences. But like, if you just put on a Sleep record and just have it on in the background, it sounds like the same thing's going on for 45 minutes, you know what I mean? But, no, I just noticed that song. I never noticed it before, because I throw it on in the background. It's background music to me. I throw it on every once in a while. And I just noticed that song title the other day, and I thought that was fucking hilarious. But what do you, so we're getting into the Tony Martin area. We're getting into, Eternal Idol, and, you've told me many times how special Tony Martin's performances are to you, so what draws you to Tony Martin's style the most?
Again, I think part of it has to do with the time I was really, like, absorbed recording all this, like, I remember, like, when I first found out about the Headbangers Ball, and one of the early times where I sat down by myself, you know, like, as, like, a 13 or 14-year-old, and they would have their Rock Blocks edition of the Headbangers Ball, which would be them playing, like, between 3 to 4 videos of the same band in a row. And then they got to a Black Sabbath block, and I think it started with, like, Paranoid. And then they played the Headless Cross video.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck is this?
I know you love Headless Cross.
I'm like, this isn't Ozzy, but this is so good.
It's the best. I can't wait to get to that one, because, I mean, I like all the others, but Headless Cross is the best Tony Martin album.
Yeah, and it's just like...
I'm really excited to get to that one.
And so because of that, like, you know, it was like one of the first, like, you know, I already explained about how I grabbed a lot of these other albums on vinyl, but again, you know, we're talking about when you also didn't have the internet to kind of, like, research all this stuff, to get all the stories behind everything, you know? I was just like, well, this is Black Sabbath without Ozzy. So it was kind of a lot of risk-taking, and kind of like, well, maybe I'll buy this because it's cheap. But the Headless Cross wasn't cheap, because it was, like, a newer album. And I bought that cassette because I saw that video, and I was just like, this is awesome. You know, it's like the first, like, it wasn't the first non-Ozzy Sabbath album I bought, but it's the first one I bought at, like, full price.
Right.
Like, knowing Ozzy's not on this, but I really like what I heard. So there's always, like, something special about that to me because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm all out of content. I mean, content for today. I mean, are you satisfied, or do you want to throw something out there, or?
No, I mean, you know, it's unfortunate because it's a strong album and all that, but there's really not that much to say. It's a pretty straightforward, like, it's good songs, but it's a very straightforward album, too.
Yep.
So there's not really, like, a lot, again, like, with a lot of the other Sabbath albums, you know, like, before you can be like, well, look at where they're going from this song into this song, and there's a lot more, like, kind of, like, interesting talking points there. This album is a straightforward rock album.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with it all, but it kind of takes away a bit when you're trying to, you can't really overanalyze it too much. It is what it is.
Yeah, and the fact that it is such a straightforward rock album, that is the only reason that I'm kind of relieved that it's not a Tony Iommi solo record, because Tony Iommi is better than a straightforward rock album. You know, like, he is, if you're going to do a Tony Iommi solo record, that should have, like, timeless guitar riffs on it. And I'm just, you know, thinking back, you know, it's 2021, so I'm looking back on all this right now. And
right.
It's if you're going to do a Tony Iommi solo record, it should have timeless guitar moments on it. But like you just said, 7 Star, it's not bland, but it is straightforward. It's just a fucking 80s rock album. It's a good 80s rock album, but that's what it is. Like you said, it is what it is.
Right.
All right. Well, in about a week, we are going to talk about Eternal Idol, and I know you've been really excited about this since we first talked about this series back in February, and we're going to be getting into the Tony Martin stuff, and I know you're stoked. I am stoked as well.
Yep, great album, another fucking terrible album cover, but just like, how can we do a worse record album cover than 7 Star? I know.
Yeah, but you know what, though? Isn't that just, the next album cover, isn't that just a photo of statues?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But you know, that's one thing you can say to defend it, though. Like, it's not like they designed the statues, or it's not like they painted them, and it's a shitty painting, you know? They took a photo of pre-existing statues. So maybe at least in part you can fault the sculptor. I don't know.
Some still photographer is gonna fucking take a lot of offense to that and come at you in the comments for that.
All six people who listen to this, yeah, it's gonna get back. All right, I will talk to you next week. Well, I'll talk to you tonight, I'm assuming, but I'll talk to you on the airwaves, internet waves next week.
Right on. I'll talk to you later, Mike.
All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.